Welcome back, capital F football fans, to the O&O Sports YouTube channel. Today, we are going over our previews and predictions for what should be another great week of college football. It's already week 10 of the 2024 college football season. It really has flown by, and as always, be sure to like and subscribe. And just as a reminder, we have our $100 giveaway going for the season. Be sure to follow us on our social medias for a chance to win. Those will be down below in the description. And without further ado, let's jump into some games to watch this week. Starting in the ACC with Virginia Tech at Syracuse. This is a great start for our games to watch. Two teams toward the top of the ACC standings, battling it out. And for us, the edge has to go to the Hokies here. Their defense is questionable at best, which obviously isn't ideal when you're up against a Syracuse offense led by Kyle McCord, who has been dicing up defenses all year. But we are confident in Kyron Drones at quarterback for the Hokies, as well as that rushing attack to really get to Syracuse here. Expect a couple orange turnovers as well to keep this one interesting. Now let's jump to the Big Ten with Minnesota traveling to Illinois to take on the 24th ranked Fighting Illini. And we got to give it to the Gophers. They started their 2024 campaign at 2-3 through week 6 and are now sitting at 5-3 with 3 straight wins. They've really turned it around, but now they're facing an Illinois team coming off a blowout loss at Oregon. They're going to be looking to bounce back at home here. They're a very efficient team through the air, which Minnesota hasn't been great at defending, and both of these defenses are going to be pretty strong units. Should make it interesting, and we may actually be leaning Minnesota here. Next, we have Duke at 5th ranked Miami. Duke's coming off an amazing loss last week. We say that because they did virtually everything right in that game and still somehow lost. Not sure whether that means it's a great loss or a historically bad one. Either way, they're going to be facing the Miracle Miami Hurricanes with Cam Ward at the helm, who's having one of the best quarterback seasons in recent memory this year. The defense has been pretty good. They have a very efficient run offense. So you may be thinking, why is this a game to watch? Well, if history is on our side here, this game will still be very close at some point. Expect a couple things to go Miami's way and they end up winning. Should still be very entertaining, especially because that Duke defense is going to be one of the best Miami has faced this year. Now let's look at Vanderbilt at Auburn in the SEC. And don't let the records fool you here. This is a great matchup between two teams with prolific run offenses. For Auburn, unfortunately, Jarquez Hunter is not playing this week, but they still do have Damari Alston, who has been very efficient, and Peyton Thorne has been able to sprinkle in the run here and there for the Tigers. And for Vanderbilt, it'll be through quarterback Diego Pavia himself for the most part. He's been generating the most big plays, followed by Cedric Alexander and AJ Newberry at running back. The defenses on both sides leave a lot to be desired. Auburn probably has the worst of the two, but to us, that just makes this one much more interesting and should be very fun to watch. Next, let's jump to the Big 12 to talk about Texas Tech traveling to Ames to take on the 11th ranked undefeated Iowa State Cyclones. And this one we want to highlight specifically because this may be the best offense Iowa State has faced so far this year. Baron Morton looks to be returning for the Red Raiders, which is bad news if you're a Cyclones fan, but Iowa State's defense has been very good this year, especially the secondary with guys like Jontez Williams, Bo Freiler, Jeremiah Cooper, all having great years. But regardless, it will be interesting to see how Iowa State responds to the onslaught of offense Tech will throw at them. Defense, not so much. Tech has had a generally awful defense this year, so this one should be relatively high scoring. Should be a good watch. Very interested to see how Iowa State responds to their last game versus UCF prior to the bye week last week. And now let's look at UCLA at Nebraska. This may not look like a great game on paper, but trust us, it is. Nebraska is going to be the easy favorite here, but UCLA has been improving the past couple weeks and they're coming off a bye week. Nebraska's going to have to figure out how to stop Ethan Garbers from pushing the ball down the field, which they can, but haven't necessarily been great at this year. Gonna have to figure out how to stop the pass more so than the run, which they've been very effective at. See last week as an example. Should be an interesting watch. Nebraska probably gonna win this game, but expect it to be a little bit closer than you might think. Next, we have 13th ranked Indiana traveling to East Lansing to take on Michigan State. This game has huge implications tied to it. Indiana is going to be facing what is probably its toughest road opponent so far this year in the Michigan State Spartans, who were very close to pulling off an upset win over their in-state rival in Michigan in Ann Arbor last week. And State's main struggles this year haven't been on defense. something that should lend positively in their favor this week, but they're going to need to be more secure with the football, something they haven't been great at with Aiden Childs at quarterback. And on top of that, Indiana's starting quarterback Curtis Rourke is trending towards playing this week, which would give Indiana the edge here in our opinion. Now let's look at USC at Washington, a former Pac-12 matchup, now a Big Ten matchup. It's Will Rogers Washington facing Miller Moss's USC. Two pretty great to good offenses, one not so great defense for the Trojans. They have not been amazing this go around. They'll need to find a way to put pressure on Rogers, who can be amazing when given a clean pocket. On top of that, Washington's run game has been solid at times this year, something you can't afford to see if you're USC this week if you want a bounce back win here. Now let's look at Kentucky at 7th ranked Tennessee. Kentucky has been far from a great team this year. They've dropped their last 3 games in a row, all in conference, but we do know they're capable of pulling off an upset, so you can't really count them out here. Tennessee will be the easy favorite, but they've looked far from perfect their last few games. They'll play this one in Neyland, but don't be surprised if this one is a little more intriguing than you might expect. Now let's look at our last game to watch in the Big 12. It's TCU at Baylor. This is a pretty big Big 12 matchup, all things considered. These are two teams who are just trying to finish the season well. For TCU, the key to this one will be hanging on to the football. Josh Hoover has been pretty good for them at quarterback this year, but you're facing a Baylor team who's been given new life with Sawyer Robertson at quarterback. Neither team is great defensively. Neither team has been super efficient passing or running this year, but this one's going to be played in Waco, and Baylor looks to have the more dynamic offense in this one, in our opinion. So we have to give the edge to the Bears here. And now for your Group of 5 highlight matchup, it is the ULM Warhawks taking on the Marshall Thundering Herd. And who would have thought we'd be talking about this game as the best Group of 5 matchup in November? For ULM, they haven't been an amazing team this season, but they've been able to scrape out some solid wins in the Sun Belt this year. They've already tied their largest win total in a season since 2019, coming into this week with 5 total wins. And they've still got 5 more weeks of football left, but they're facing the Thundering Herd this week, a team who has looked pretty decent on paper and whose only Group of 5 loss has been to Georgia Southern a few weeks ago. And they're probably going to be our favorite here just because their rush offense has been pretty solid so far this year, and the Warhawks' run defense hasn't been pretty solid so far this year, to say the least. So give us Marshall to hand ULM its 3rd loss of the year. And moving on into our big impact matchups, let's start with a pretty underrated SEC matchup this week. It's 19th ranked Ole Miss traveling to Fayetteville to take on the Arkansas Razorbacks. And this is a great matchup. Arkansas is 22nd in the 0-0 poll, and we think they have a chance to solidify themselves in the AP this week. The biggest problem for them here, though, is they're going to be facing an Ole Miss team who has been very good at stopping the run this year, which, if you followed the channel, has been what we've called Arkansas's biggest strength this year. Ole Miss has held opponents to under 80 yards per game on the ground, something that doesn't make us the most confident in Arkansas's ability to establish the run here. And that could mean we get a quarterback duel here, and in one of those, we obviously are going to trust Jackson Dart way more than we trust Taylon Green. Taylon Green was our player of the week last week, but Jackson Dart is going to be the better pure quarterback here. So you can probably guess we're giving Ole Miss the edge here. Now let's look at Florida versus Georgia in Jacksonville. It is the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, and you may be willing to write Florida off in this one, but I would like to stop you right there and say that Georgia's not an unbeatable team this year. They've had bad games, awful games, and Florida likewise has quietly won 3 of their last 4 games in the SEC. Looked pretty good in the loss versus Tennessee as well. Looked great last week against Kentucky. They're going to be a team that can put points up on the board. They've averaged about 33 points a game in conference play this year, which should absolutely scare you if you're a Bulldogs fan. A lot of people have written the Gators off, but they've gotten a lot better over the course of the season. Georgia obviously is going to be a lot better on paper, but don't be surprised if this one ends up in a close battle. Now let's go back to the Big Ten, where the first-ranked Oregon Ducks are taking on Michigan in Ann Arbor. This may just be Oregon's biggest test yet. I know they played Ohio State just a few weeks ago, but they got that one at home, and Autzen was rocking. They definitely felt the home field advantage in that game, and they definitely will not in this one. This may just be the most hostile environment that they've had to walk into this year. And Davis Warren surprisingly did not look terrible for the Wolverines last week against Michigan State. He wasn't throwing down the field super often, but he also didn't make very many mistakes either. But Oregon is going to be a whole different ballgame this year. They are hot. They are clicking. They're probably the best team in football right now, for being honest. And they're not going to be afraid of Michigan's defense here. They faced some tough fronts this year, and they still have a big fat goose egg in the loss column. But with that big house environment at play, I'm not counting the Wolverines out here. Now let's look at 10th ranked Texas A&M facing the South Carolina Gamecocks. This is set up to be a great game this week. The red hot Texas A&M Aggies are headed to Columbia to take on the Gamecocks of South Carolina, and the Gamecocks are going to have a shot in this one once again just because of how explosive and ruthless that defense is. Bill Connolly of ESPN put out a graphic the other day of the best schools in terms of pressure rate and sack rate in the country, and I believe South Carolina was second on that list, if not top 3 in the country. That defensive front is terrifying with Dylan Stewart and Kyle Kennard on the edges. The jury's still out on Sellers and that offense, but the Cox are going to have a shot in this one off that defense alone. For the Aggies, though, it's going to be much of the same. Marcel Reed has been an explosive dual threat guy for you this year. Keep using his legs to open up the defense and use Le'Veon Moss's as well. He's been extremely efficient carrying the ball as well. Wear that D-line out, downfield shots will open up, and let Marcel Reed cook in the 3rd and 4th quarter, and it'll be a relatively easy day if you're Mike Elko. Now let's jump to the ACC, where the Louisville Cardinals are traveling to Clemson to take on the 11th ranked Tigers. This is going to be a very interesting watch just because this is easily the best team Clemson has faced this year since week 1 in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, of course, and they'll have the luxury of playing this one at home. They've looked great in almost every game since week 1. They've been highly efficient running the ball. They've been able to shut down offenses and generate turnovers at a fairly decent rate also. But then in comes the question, have they played even a decent team since Georgia? And the short answer is not really, but similarly to a team like Indiana, they've looked phenomenal in those wins regardless of the level of competition they're playing. They will be facing a Louisville team who has also been pretty efficient on offense this year, not so much on defense, so will be interesting to see if they can force the issue here like they did against Miami a few weeks ago and take Clemson to the wire here. And now for your last big impact matchup, it is 18th ranked Pitt at 20th ranked SMU, and what a matchup this is. Two teams who have blown past their expectations this year and who are both sitting with 7 wins through 9 weeks this season. Both of these teams have quietly been collecting some very good wins this year. For Pitt, it's been teams like Syracuse, Cal, at North Carolina, West Virginia, at Cincinnati. For SMU, it's been pretty similar. I mean, look at TCU, at Louisville, at Duke last week, and they lost to a BYU team who's also looked amazing this year as their only loss. And these two programs are going to meet with potential ACC title implications on the line here. For Pitt, they're going to keep doing what they've been doing with Eli Holstein. He's been great this year, and the rushing attack will be a nice complement to that passing game. Their backs have been very efficient running the ball this year, but they're going up against an SMU defense who's been keen on the run this year. Only 88 yards allowed on the ground per game this year, and their rushing attack has been even better than Pitt's, with Brashard Smith and quarterback Kevin Jennings spearheading that game. They'll need to hold on to the ball if they want to win. Can't afford to have a game like Duke or BYU where they turn it over a bunch if they want to win this one, but they've got a pretty strong chance nonetheless. And moving on into your O&O Sports capital G game of the week. You voted on it, and this week we have the 4th ranked Ohio State Buckeyes traveling to Happy Valley to take on the 3rd ranked Penn State Nittany Lions. What a game we have here. Ohio State is coming off a bad performance against Nebraska, facing the now 3rd ranked Nittany Lions, a team that looks really good this year but has not been able to beat you in the last 7 tries. These are going to be 2 great offenses, 2 elite defenses, and you'll see the stats popping up on your screen so you can see for yourself. And someone has to lose this one. Shocker, I know. For Penn State, ironically, we think they need to take a page out of Nebraska's book, something that probably hasn't been said since the 90s, and wear out that Ohio State front by running a bunch. Oregon did it too. It's proven to be a great strategy against the Buckeyes this year. And for Ohio State, you may want to move away from an ideology like that and attempt to dink and dunk for short yardage with Will Howard and the plethora of options you have at receiver, including those 2 running backs. Penn State has been great defensively, but if there's an exploitable part of that unit, it would be the secondary. Wisconsin kind of did that last week, but wasn't able to turn it into points late. We're very interested to see if Ohio State takes that route and follows in their footsteps, or if they try to get the run game going again this week. Who knows? But for your players to watch, it's going to be the running back tandems in this one. We couldn't help ourselves, so we're double dipping this week. And for the Buckeyes, their running back duo has 143 carries, almost 1,000 yards, 6.8 yards on average per run, 10 touchdowns with 16 receptions for 99 yards and an additional touchdown. For Penn State, they've rushed the ball 176 total times for nearly 1,000 yards as well, 5.6 yards on average per carry with 7 touchdowns, but have more receptions with 20, more reception yards with 202, and 5 additional touchdowns. And now let's move on into your upset watch with our good friend Todd. Everybody say hey to Todd. Thank you. And let's start this one off with the undefeated Miami Hurricanes. They are going to be a 21.5 point favorite, and this one should be a lot closer in our opinion. Todd and myself have been ever so slowly backing off the Miami train this year. They're still a great team, still probably a playoff team, let me be clear, but they've been skating on thin ice the past month and a half. Still feel very comfortable saying they'll win this one, but Todd's gonna have this one at a 7 in the hot zone. Could be an interesting watch. We're for sure going to keep our eyes on it. Next, let's look at Iowa State taking on Texas Tech, who is a 13.5 point underdog in this one. And similarly to Miami, Todd has been less keen on Iowa State as of late, but he also isn't very high on Texas Tech. With Baron Morton back, they could make it a good bit more interesting. If they can force this one into a shootout, I could see Tech winning this one realistically. That Cyclone defense is very good, and Todd thinks the opposite of the Red Raider defense. He's telling me he's got this one at a 5 this week in warm range, but not too worrisome. And last in your upset watch, we're going to look at Indiana traveling to East Lansing to take on Michigan State, who is only a 7.5 point dog this week. This is an interesting matchup with the added factor of this one being played on the road for Indiana. And we like the Spartan defense, but we're not super confident in them as a team just yet. Definitely trending in the right direction, but me and Todd are very confident in Indiana already as a team, especially because Rourke is most likely back this week. Todd has this one at a 3. Expect Indiana to win and cover here. And now let's move on into your big impact predictions. Here are all of your matchups this week. It is a great spread, starting with 19th ranked Ole Miss at Arkansas. As much as the upset would be awesome here, we're not super assured in Arkansas's rushing attack in this one, which has been the most pivotal part of their offense in their wins this year, like we said. Ole Miss will have the better QB, probably the better defense all around, and they aren't bad at rushing the football either. We like the Rebels to win this one 28-17. Next, it's the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, Florida versus Georgia. Todd is relatively high on Florida right now, like we said earlier, and for good reason. They have not looked bad at all the past few weeks, but they are Florida, and Georgia is Georgia. An upset could be brewing here, but we'll trust that Kirby Smart will have his guys in a better position to win this one than Billy Napier will. But we do expect Billy Napier to have a back against the wall potential job saving game here. Give us the dogs in this one in a close win, 27-24. And now let's look at Oregon at Michigan. This should be a pretty great duel early. We expect Oregon to pull away late here. They'll have a huge edge and firepower offensively, and they match up very well with Michigan on defense. Most likely won't be a great day to be a Michigan fan. They will be at home for this one, but we just don't have a ton of confidence in them here. Give us the Ducks to win this one 30-10. And now let's look at Texas A&M at South Carolina, and this should end up being a great defensive battle. Not sure if it'll be a slugfest type of matchup because we're not entirely sure what to expect from South Carolina's offense, but we know they can punch up, and we'd be foolish not to expect them to here. We like the Aggies here, but I expect this one to be very close. Could be a back and forth type of game with the Aggies winning 28-27. And now let's jump to the ACC with Louisville at Clemson. Clemson's biggest test in conference play yet. Todd likes Clemson a lot here, but in all honesty, I'm not so sure. We're going to get to see a lot from them in this week, and we'll probably be able to get a much better gauge on where they actually are this year in this game. But like I said, we like Clemson here, and we think they'll pull this one out 38-24. And with the last big impact matchup, 18th ranked Pitt at 20th ranked SMU. This is going to be a great game. We're very excited to watch this one, and with all due respect, this game deserves better than the ACC network, truthfully. These are two great teams teams with a lot on the line. This should absolutely be a primetime game, but that's neither here nor there. This one is nauseatingly close in all of our metrics. I mean, if this one went to 9 overtimes, we would not be surprised at all. To peel back the curtain a bit and give you guys a glimpse at how Todd works, he likes Pitt more here on their own, but the home field advantage for SMU here actually has him at a deadlock. We have to pick those, so give us the Mustangs here for no particular reason, 31-28. And for your game of the week, Ohio State at Penn State should be an all-out bloodbath. And in our opinion, it's all going to come down to who plays the better 4 quarters on defense here. Both of these teams are going to be built specifically tailor-made to beat each other. So it's most likely going to be decided by 1 or 2 possessions. And we just trust Ohio State to get more big stops than we do Penn State right now. But if Drew Aller gets going and they can get those dynamic backs in space, either through the air or on the ground, expect this one to get real good going into the latter portion of this matchup. All that is to say, we have Ohio State winning this one 32-24, and we can already see the James Franklin hot takes coming from a mile away, but we'll have to save that rant for another day. And that's going to wrap it up for this video. As always, be sure to like and subscribe, and be sure to tune in early next week for our Week 10 recap.